One of the three pillars the world stands on is Gimilut Chasadim, to perform acts of kindness. And perhaps if there's someone we could take a lesson from on what it means to be generous, compassionate, gracious, there'll be no one better to learn from than from the letter Gimmel. The Gimmel, what kind of lesson can we take from the Gimmel on what it means to be giving? Well, if we would take a look at the English alphabet, we can never explain why the A is next to the B or why the B is near the C, nor can we explain why it looks the way it does or why it's configured the way it is. But in the Hebrew alphabet, there's much depth and much wisdom behind every single letter, why this letter comes after that letter or why that letter comes before this letter. Let's take, for instance, the letter Gimmel. The Gemara tells us the letter Gimmel comes from the word Gimul, as in Gimlut Chasadim, to perform acts of kindness. So the Gimmel is like that little person approaching somebody with his two legs stationed firmly to the ground, and is stretching out his arm, extending it to give to somebody, to perform a chesed, to perform a kindness. But to be giving to someone, to be a giver, you need a receiver. So who's the next letter that comes after the Gimmel? The letter Dalid. The Dalid is standing straight up, and he has his arm stretched out because he's asking for help, he's asking for tzedakah. Hence, the letter Dalid comes from the word Dal, which means poor. But look and pay attention how the Gimmel approaches the Dalid. He approaches him from the back, as if he's running after him, when in truth the Dalid should be running after the Gimmel. Who's benefiting from who? It is the Gimmel who's benefiting the Dalid, and it's the Dalid who's in need of the Gimmel. Yet the Gimmel doesn't want to make the Dalid feel uncomfortable taking from him. So he's chasing the Dalid to make him feel as if the Dalid is doing a favor to the Gimmel. And in this case, the Gimmel is teaching us a fundamental lesson on what it means to perform a true kindness. But even more so, pay attention how the Dalid has his back facing towards the Gimmel, because he doesn't want to be the one on the receiving end. It's all well known, nobody wants to be on the receiving end. And the Dalid is embarrassed receiving and taking from the Gimmel. So he has his back face towards the Gimmel because he's ashamed and embarrassed taking from him. And the Gimmel understands that. So he approaches them with a certain sense of acknowledgement, with a certain sense of sensitivity, a certain sense of recognition, because he understands how difficult it is for the Dalid to take from him. And so he approaches the Dalid in a very sensitive way, in a very inconspicuous way, in a way that the Dalid should feel comfortable accepting from him. So somebody once told me, now I understand there's a whole story playing itself out over here. The Gimmel is teaching us and setting an example to us how to give a true kindness. But then he asked me, then why is it that the letter Hey comes right after the letter Dalid? I understand why the Dalid comes after the Gimmel, because the Gimmel is giving to the Dalid, but why is it that the Hey comes after the Dalid? And I explained perhaps the reason is because the Hey stands for Hashem. And the Dalid, although he's receiving from the Gimmel, in the end of the day, he must turn his hand to Hashem because he knows that it is Hashem who is his true benefactor, and it is Borei Olam, the master of the universe, who could help him. And there's no one else, no doctors, no technology, nobody in this world could help us besides Hashem. And so we could take a beautiful lesson from the Gimmel, the Dalid, and the Hey. How to give, but in the end of the day, the taker should always understand that it's coming from Hashem. Perhaps this will be our spark of inspiration, how to perform a true chesed, a true kindness.